Welcome to The Debate. Atlantic Records told Bruno Mars his early demos for the 2012 album Unorthodox Jukebox were just terrible, unmarketable, and, entirely devoid of a clear demographic lane, which is precisely why the record stands as a pure, unadulterated act of spiritual and artistic defiance against a completely soulless, EDM-obsessed industry.
Well, you can romanticize those boardroom screaming matches all you want.
I'm not romanticizing it. It's a documented history. In an era where mainstream pop was suffocating under the weight of algorithmic synthesizers, predictable dance drops, and David Guetta-style massive crescendos, Mars explicitly refused to be what he called a circus clown selling fake goods.
Right. But calling Unorthodox Jukebox spiritual defiance completely ignores the fundamental mechanics of product differentiation.
He fought the executives who demanded he lazily recreate the safe, radio-friendly formula of his debut, doo-wops and hooligans. He didn't just want a new sound. He wanted a revolution in how pop music was physically recorded.
Okay, but if you're listening to this and remembering how inescapable that album was in 2012, you probably thought it sounded uniquely authentic compared to everything else on the radio.
Exactly, because instead of submitting to the boardroom, he delivered a masterpiece of unquantized human performance. It proved true art requires risking your entire career trajectory.
Let's be real here. In a pop landscape that was indeed saturated with digital synths, pivoting to a retro analog aesthetic wasn't some noble suicide mission on the altar of art. It was a highly calculated, meticulously engineered brand repositioning.
Calling it brand repositioning is incredibly cynical.
It's just accurate. Mars was trapped. He needed to escape a limiting, less profitable, cutesy demographic that had latched onto songs like Just the Way You Are.
So evolving as an artist is now just a demographic escape plan?
When you're shedding your calculated adorability to capture an older, wealthier, and more lucrative audience, yes. That isn't a spiritual rebellion. It was a necessary portfolio update.
A portfolio update, wow.
Yeah, he recognized that the modern pop space was overcrowded, so he pivoted to a blue ocean market, a completely uncontested business space with no direct competition. He didn't invent a new genre. He just repackaged the 1970s and 80s for a generation that didn't know any better.
We're talking about an artist who had just achieved multi-platinum global phenomenon status. Do you have any idea how much leverage a label exerts on an artist at that exact moment?
I'm well aware.
The executives wanted a sequel to his first album because predictability scales efficiently in corporate music. When Mars presented a vision that jumped violently from reggae to funk to classic rock, it was rejected.
Right, because it couldn't be easily categorized for radio syndication algorithms.
Yes. And the defiance isn't just in the genre hopping. It is embedded deeply in the album's physical architecture. The production trio, the Smeezingtons, so Mars, Philip Lawrence, and Ari Levine, they didn't just slap a vintage filter on a Pro Tool session. They fundamentally altered the engineering process. They brought in Mark Ronson, who applied the exact same unforgiving analog constraints he used with the Dap Kings and Amy Winehouse.
Unforgiving is certainly a word for it.
It was. Ronson used a single microphone to record entire drum kits, and we really need to pause and explain the sheer musical discipline that requires.
I'm sure you will.
When you use one microphone in the center of a room, you can't isolate the snare from the hi-hat later on a computer. You can't just digitally turn down the cymbals if they are too loud.
Sure.
If the drummer hits the brass too hard, the frequency bleeds over everything and the entire take is ruined. It entirely eliminates the modern safety net of fixing it in the mix.
Okay, but
It forces the human to mix the song with their own limbs, striking each instrument with absolute, unquantized intention in real time. That isn't a brand strategy. That is a terrifying commitment to production purity.
you are painting this beautiful, tragic picture of them weeping over analog tape machines, but the actual signal chain of the record tells a much more corporate, pragmatic story.
Oh, here we go.
No, listen. While Ronson was allegedly playing with single mic placements to, capture the muse, co-producer Jeff Basker was simultaneously heavily relying on digital plugins, specifically the Waves CLA-3A compressor.
Every modern album uses compression.
They were dragging this software across the vocal and bass tracks aggressively. Why? Let's explain what a compressor actually does. It squashes the dynamic range of a sound.
I know what a compressor does.
It takes the quietest, grittiest imperfections of a bass line and forcefully amplifies them until the track physically pushes air out of the speaker. It simulates an aggression and a volume that the bassist didn't actually play in the room.
It enhances the performance. It doesn't fabricate it.
They artificially made the sonic sound tougher. It is engineered authenticity. And let's not pretend this was a monk-like pursuit of musical purity either.
How so?
Well, when Mars realized his sweet, analog-tinged romantic ballads were bombing in Paris strip clubs during his tour, he didn't retreat to a vintage console to search his soul.
No, he adapted.
He pragmatically picked up the phone and hired EDM titan Diplo to engineer the track Moneymaker Smile. He specifically commissioned a booming, digitally programmed sub-bass trap anthem because he identified a lucrative gap in the strip club market.
Right.
That is the literal definition of commercial adaptability.
Hiring Diplo isn't a betrayal of authenticity, though. It is a literal manifestation of the album's title, An Unorthodox Jukebox.
Oh, that's convenient.
The fact that he placed an EDM trap hybrid directly alongside a Memphis Soul tribute proves he wasn't bound by any single aesthetic dogma. He was a curator of vibes.
A curator, right.
And since you brought up the studio methods, let's look at the Memphis sessions. Ronson and Bosker didn't just stay in Los Angeles tweaking that CLA3A plugin you love mentioning. They made a physical, expensive pilgrimage to Sun Studios and Royal Studios in Tennessee.
A great photo op.
They went to the literal birthplace of rock and soul, where Al Green recorded to absorb the acoustic dimensions and spatial characteristics of the rooms, where the pioneers built the genre.
I mean, yes, acoustic dimensions are a real thing, but
The wood on the walls, the shape of the ceiling, the exact microphones that captured history. They were seeking the original pigments of the musical renaissance, not just a preset on a soundboard.
okay, but soaking up the historical resonances of Sun Studios doesn't change the final product.
When Mars recorded the vocal takes for Locked Out of Heaven, he pushed his 3-octave tenor range so aggressively that he was literally brought to his knees in the vocal booth.
A very dramatic anecdote.
He was tearing his vocal cords to achieve a specific kind of gravel that modern pop stars usually fake with distortion pedals. You cannot mathematically program that level of physical and spiritual desperation.
That brutal analog process you're praising, that grueling pursuit of analog perfection, it's exactly why the album is barely 34 minutes long.
It's filler-free.
A pilgrimage to Memphis makes for a fantastic press release, absolutely. But the resulting tracklist was a highly polished, commercially optimized product designed to hijack existing musical templates.
Hijack? That is absurd.
He might call a 34-minute album filler-free, artistic integrity, but from an industry perspective, it is highly compressed, algorithmic pop efficiency. It is the maximum viable product they could squeeze out before algorithmic fatigue set in.
I completely disagree.
Let's talk about the results of those exhausting sessions. Locked Out of Heaven doesn't just nod to 80s new wave. It aggressively appropriates the syncopated guitar upstrokes of The Police, strips out any of the complex political nuance Sting might have included,
It's a pop song, not a UN resolution.
pairs it with a heavily compressed 4-on-the-floor kick drum designed for modern clubs, and splices in that aggressive, vocal sample purely as a bridge to modern dance pop.
It's an homage.
Every single element of that song is an assembly line of familiar, focus group dopamine triggers. It's an engineered Frankenstein of things the public already proved they liked 30 years ago.
It is a brilliant synthesis of 20th century music history, not an assembly line.
Synthesis or cloning?
Locked Out of Heaven takes the specific C to D minor and C to B flat chord structures of 80s rock chords that inherently create a feeling of unresolved tension and violently drops them into a modern synthesizer chorus. It creates a bridge between generations. It's a masterful homage.
I think your definition of homage borders on calculated plagiarism, and the industry receipts actually prove it.
Oh, you're bringing up the legal paperwork now?
Let's discuss the track Treasure, because this is where the shared musical vocabulary argument completely falls apart. Treasure operates within a well-established genre template. If this album is a noble tribute to shared musical heritage, Why did Mars and his label explicitly contact the French electronic artist Breakbot to ask for legal permission to cover his track Baby I'm Yours?
Because they respected the original artist.
They asked. Breakbot explicitly declined the request. So what did the Smithingtons do with that rejection? They systematically cloned the sonic architecture anyway.
That is a massive overstatement.
We aren't talking about a vague influence. The specific slap bass groove, the exact BPM, the shimmering synth arpeggios, the placement of the hand claps. It is an exact structural replica of Breakbot's work.
It evokes late 70s disco and funk. Patrice Rushen, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Rebranding intellectual property theft as signifying, this academic cultural idea of borrowing, winking at, and reinterpreting Black musical aesthetics is just a convenient, retroactive intellectual shield.
It's not a shield, it's how genres operate. Breakbot himself was operating within that exact same template.
Photocopying a rival architect's blueprints, building the exact same house, and telling the judge it's just an homage to the concept of walls doesn't make you an artist. It makes you a liability.
The industry resolved it amicably.
And we know it was a liability because Atlantic Records eventually amended the publishing rights to officially include Breakbot and Christopher Kahn on the writing credits specifically to avoid a massive infringement lawsuit.
Standard industry practice when similarities arise.
That is corporate risk management. That is the legal department cleaning up a mess. It is not a creative dialogue.
Reducing the entire lineage of pop music to a series of retroactive legal technicalities completely ignores how music actually evolves.
It acknowledges how commerce works.
The fact that the industry resolved the credits amicably, without a trial, shows a functioning ecosystem, not a malicious theft. But fine, if you want to strip away the historical references, if you want to throw out the analog drum kits, and look purely at the artist's core, look at the ballad When I Was Your Man.
Ah, the piano ballad.
If this album is just a calculated corporate product designed to monopolize a market, how do you explain a track completely stripped of all production?
Very easily, actually.
There are no drums to hide behind. There are no dub effects. There is no CLA3A compressor artificially toughening his voice. It is just a grand piano, an isolated vocal track, and the sheer power of narcissistic failure.
It's a melodramatic set piece. Mars completely subverted the standard pop breakup song by offering a painful, unvarnished self-indictment. My pride, my ego, my needs, and my selfish ways. He meticulously itemizes his mundane failures, failing to buy flowers, failing to hold her hand, failing to dedicate his time.
Yes, he read the lyrics.
Do you know how hard it is to hold a modern pop audience's attention for 3.5 minutes with just a piano and regret? It tied Adele's Someone Like You as a piano vocal track hitting #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on the back of absolute terrifying vulnerability.
It hit #1 because it leverages parasocial empathy brilliantly.
It's just honest.
By stripping away the drums and leaving the ambient room noise around his vocal takes, the production creates an artificial intimacy that tricks the listener's brain into feeling like Mars is sitting in their living room, confessing his flaws directly to them.
You can't trick people into feeling genuine emotion.
It is highly effective emotional manipulation, but if you want to analyze the vulnerability of the album, we cannot just cherry-pick one sad piano ballad. We have to look at the overarching sociology of the record.
Here comes the sociological sledgehammer.
The record is dripping with what cultural critics correctly identify as the male pop gaze. You highlight this one moment of supposed self-awareness, but you ignore the deeply entrenched chauvinistic tropes structuring the entire rest of the track list.
It's a pop album. It deals with romance and heartbreak.
It wildly vacillates between extreme objectification and hostile aggression. Treasure, the very song we just debated regarding plagiarism, runs purely on benevolent sexism.
Benevolent sexism? It's a dance song.
It is the concept that the female subject exists merely as a passive, beautiful object who requires male validation to realize her own worth. You are my treasure. You are my golden star.
Oh, come on.
She has no agency, no interior life, no personality in the text. It treats the woman like a shiny object that only has value because Bruno Mars is actively looking at her, and it hides this condescension under the guise of an upbeat dance anthem.
You are applying sociological sledgehammers to a disco ball.
I'm just reading the text.
It is a remarkably cynical, hyper-academic reading of a dance song whose literal solitary objective is to make someone feel beautiful and confident on a dance floor. You are demanding a complex psychological thesis from a song designed to be played under strobe lights.
I am applying analytical rigor to the text he deliberately published to a global audience, and the text gets exponentially worse the deeper you go into the track list.
Worse how?
Look at the hostile sexism, the active resentment of women in tracks like Young Girls and Natalie.
Resentment?
In Young Girls, which is cleverly masked by an expansive, Coldplay-esque indie pop soundscape, women are portrayed not as human beings, but as irresistible, destructive forces.
It's about the pitfalls of fame and temptation.
They are femme fatales who exist solely to drag the well-meaning, helpless artist into the abyss of fame. It completely absolves him of his own behavior.
That's a classic blues trope.
And Natalie takes it much further, directly into explicit misogyny. Over a gritty blues rock field holler beat, he sings a literal, detailed revenge fantasy about hunting down a gold-digging bitch.
It's storytelling.
He warns her to sleep with one eye open. He strongly implies he is willing to commit vigilante violence and go to federal prison just to ruin her life. The analog production you love so much is specifically used to mask the violence of the lyrics. And then, of course, there is Gorilla.
Ah, yes, Gorilla. The very first song written for the project.
The nadir of the album.
The thematic catalyst that set the tone for the entire recording process. It isn't hostile. It's raw, animalistic intimacy. It's an arena rock slow jam deeply indebted to Prince's most adventurous work.
Please don't drag Prince into this.
It builds from floating synthesizers into a massive, booming percussive climax. It is unapologetic adult reality. It is exactly the kind of thematic risk a true artist takes when they realize their previous work was too safe.
It is a calculated, desperate shock tactic.
How is it a shock tactic?
A body full of liquor and a cocaine kicker, making love like gorillas? It's completely contrived Wagnerian sex. Massive, overblown, theatrical intimacy, designed exclusively to earn a parental advisory sticker for the album cover.
He was just expressing himself.
He needed the industry and the public to know he wasn't the sweet, fedora-wearing, just-the-way-you-are guy anymore. So what does he do? He invokes SWAT teams, cocaine, and screaming in the lyrics purely to establish a manufactured bad boy edge.
It's not manufactured if it's his actual life.
It's incredibly transparent to anyone who understands pop marketing. It protected him from accusations of being a label-manufactured puppy dog by aggressively overcompensating with explicit, hypermasculine posturing. It is the oldest trick in the former teen idol playbook.
Transparent? It's intellectually honest. He was violently rejecting the sanitized, Disney-fied version of himself that the executives wanted to desperately maintain because it sold well to middle America.
Right, to sell to a different America.
You call it a shock tactic, I call it reclaiming his adulthood in a public forum. The fact that the explicit lyrics and the jarring shift in tone make critics and academics like you uncomfortable is exactly why it's artistically valid.
Discomfort doesn't equal artistic merit.
He was no longer playing the loyal, safe, predictable entertainer. He was reflecting the actual messy, unfiltered reality of a rock star's existence. He proved he could operate in challenging, mature, R-rated thematic spaces just like his legendary contemporaries.
He proved he could act the part.
He took a massive gamble by alienating his core demographic, and the public completely validated that risk.
The public validated a perfectly executed marketing campaign designed to capture a new demographic.
The public validated undeniable generational talent. And the metrics absolutely destroy the idea that this was just a cynical corporate exercise.
Let's hear the metrics then.
Let's talk about the actual cultural impact, because the numbers here matter. The album sold nearly 9 million copies globally. It went 6 times platinum in the United States. It won the Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Album.
Sales equal marketing success, yes.
But the ultimate vindication of the album's pure artistic intent isn't the plastic trophy, it is the Moonshine Jungle Tour. 144 shows across the globe, over $156 million grossed. He sold out massive arenas from London to New Zealand, playing to over 1 million people. And why did they buy those tickets? Because people were utterly starved for genuine live instrumentation.
Or they just wanted to dance to a catchy hook.
right in the middle of the digital EDM boom, when every other pop star was pressing play on a MacBook behind a DJ booth. The public wanted to see the hooligans playing real brass horns, real bass guitars, with unquantified human sweat and energy.
A very expensive aesthetic choice.
There were no massive LED screens playing pre-rendered CGI to distract the audience. Mars openly studied the archival tapes of James Brown's legendary Tammy Show performance and Prince's Purple Rain tour to perfect his stagecraft, eschewing heavy backing tracks for actual, blistering musicianship.
Right.
Unorthodox Jukebox literally terraformed the 2010s pop landscape. It gave major labels the courage to invest in live instrumentation again. It single-handedly paved the way for Daft Punk's Get Lucky, Justin Timberlake's Take Back the Night, and eventually his own undeniable masterpieces like Uptown Funk, 24K Magic, and Silk Sonic.
Well,
He forced the entire global industry to remember what real music sounds like, and he did it by sticking to his artistic principles. True art won.
all you've done by passionately listing those figures is enthusiastically recite the financial metrics that prove my exact thesis.
How so?
The blueprint worked flawlessly. He successfully commodified nostalgia. He packaged regressive, misogynistic tropes into radio-friendly, expertly compressed melodies, slapped a very expensive live instrumentation veneer on it, and sold it back to the masses under the guise of authenticity.
That is so incredibly reductive.
The fact that his tour grossed $156 million doesn't validate the album as an act of spiritual defiance. It validates it as an unparalleled triumph of corporate product design.
You can't fake a live performance of that caliber.
The record labels didn't suddenly learn to love real music because of Bruno Mars. They learned that the 1970s and 80s aesthetic could be endlessly monetized for a new generation if properly packaged with enough swagger and PR about analog purity.
That's entirely missing the point.
He didn't terraform the pop landscape to make room for art. He terraformed it to build a monopoly on the past. He bought real estate in an empty market and built an empire on borrowed blueprints.
If you genuinely believe that the physical sweat left on those arena stages, the vocal cords literally shredded in those Memphis vocal booths, and the sheer human joy of a perfectly executed funk groove were just the byproduct of a corporate marketing strategy, then you fundamentally misunderstand why human beings connect to music in the first place.
I understand why they buy it.
You can measure the mid-range compression on a software plugin, you can audit the retroactive writing credits for Breakbot, and you can deconstruct the lyrics through a cynical, sociological lens all you want. But you cannot engineer the soul out of the record. The magic remains, completely untouched by your corporate cynicism.
And if you genuinely believe that a multinational record label's primary output is soul rather than scalable revenue, you are blinding yourself to the gears of the machine that built your idol. The illusion of rebellion is simply the most expensive product on the shelf, and you bought it at full price.